Hey everyone, welcome back for a little TLC. So, for the past week or so, God has really been dealing with me about the fruits of the Spirit and specifically the spirit of self control, which I know I don't like to talk about or hear about, but that's what we're going to talk about today, the spirit of self control. Okay, so the Oxford Dictionary defines self control as the ability to control oneself, in particular one's emotions and desires, or the expression of them in one's behavior, especially in difficult situations. And I really like this definition because a lot of times I hear people talking about self control as it pertains to sexual immorality, but it's really so much more than that. God has been dealing with me specifically about self control in the area of eating. And I want to encourage us to think about self control in every area of our lives. So that could be your sexual interactions, it could be our discipline when it comes to diet and exercise. That could be our ability to hold our tongue when we are in some trying circumstances or when people are getting on our nerves. It could be our ability to say no to shopping or to social media or to other stimuli that typically get to us. We need self-control in every area of our lives. I think for a while I didn't like to hear about self-control because it just seems really unpleasant. It seems like basically you're being a slave and you can't do the things that make you feel good, basically. And so the more that I thought about it, the more I think that self control is necessary so that we can do the things that God calls us to do and tells us to do. But most importantly, self-control is necessary so that we don't fall into the trap of this world and so that we don't always fall to the schemes of the enemy. We live in a world that plays upon our inability to have self-control. We live in a world that expects for us and wants us to not have self-control. We live in a time where do what you want, have what you want right now is promoted. We live in a world that glorifies sex, overindulgence in drugs and alcohol, unhealthy eating, because eating healthily is sometimes and oftentimes more expensive than eating a healthy diet. We live in a world that promotes just giving into your emotions, no matter how it might look or how it might impact those around you. And that just isn't healthy. These images, this type of rhetoric is portrayed in the media, it's portrayed in the songs that we listen to. And so we're bombarded with these images that say you don't have to have self control, you can do whatever you want. And doing whatever we want is not always the best thing. A lot of times when we're doing whatever we want, we destroy relationships with other people. We end up spending all our money because we have no control over what in the world we're buying. We just want to do whatever we want. A lot of times we're very unhealthy because we're eating whatever we want with no consideration on how that impacts our body. So I think that when we give in, and we never exercise self-control, we a lot of times end up broke. We end up unhappy and we end up unsatisfied. And I do think that a lot of times living a life of living a life where you're doing whatever you want might feel good in the moment, but the consequences later on always make at least me feel some type of way. On the other hand, the Bible does tell us that no discipline feels right at the time. It doesn't feel good at the time, but in the end, there is a harvest of peace and righteousness that is produced by it. And so we kind of have these two options. Are we going to do whatever we want and a lot of the times end up unsatisfied? Or are we going to tap into the spirit of self-control, which doesn't always feel good, but will produce a harvest of peace and righteousness in the end? I really like the scripture that tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And in many translations, the word sound mind is actually translated to mean self-control. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because when I do have self-control, when I am following the pattern of what God has told me to do, and I'm not always giving in to my emotions, I do have a sound mind. I think it's just evidence of the peace that comes from living a controlled lifestyle. I know what you all might be thinking. Living in self-control can be difficult. Sometimes you want to have that extra piece of cake even though you're full. Sometimes, I mean, at least I do. Sometimes you want to clap back at whoever is talking to you some kind of way. It's difficult to turn the other cheek. Sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, I really need to buy this, or it's impossible for me to put my phone down because social media has all these exciting things on it. I need to spend 10 more minutes, which oftentimes for me turns into 30 more minutes or an hour. But I want to encourage you to tap in to the spirit of self-control. It isn't always going to be easy, but my Bible tells me that in my moments of weakness, that's when the power of God is made perfect. So rather than running away from God when we're having our moments of weakness, I encourage you to run to God when you are feeling weak, when your self-control is just non-existent. Rely on the Lord, whose power is made perfect in those moments. I can guarantee you all that when you do exercise self-control, when you say no, even one time when you normally would have said yes, it feels amazing. You do, at least I do, feel so much peace, and I feel some accomplishment, some sense of accomplishment when I exercise self-control, even if in that moment it was difficult. A couple minutes later, or even the next day, I'm like, yes, you know what? I did that. I lived in self-control, and I expect that peace and righteousness will come from me doing that. So that's really what I have for today. I pray that you all will live in self-control today. I pray that you have a little bit of an easier time living a self-controlled life and operating in the spirit of self-control this week. And prayerfully, you will pray for me that I will do the same, because sometimes it gets hard for me. But yeah, that's what I have for today. And I hope to see you all next week for a little TLC. Bye-bye.